Hey, it's Ollie here. Time for scale tip number 9. So today we're going to talk about hiring a sales team. Now, hiring a sales team and having a salesperson on the phone making calls for you, regardless of what you sell, whether it's coaching or services or products, is one of the best forms of leverage you'll ever get in your business, right? Every other hire can be incredible because you can get more time. But with a sales team, you can get more cash and you can get other people to make the cash for you. So it's really, really cool, especially if you're doing it on commission. So I want to tell you a little bit about how I hired a sales team, the stuff I went through to make it happen, the things that made it work, and the reason why it was successful. And I've seen quite a few other people try and hire sales teams and it go south and kind of wreck their business. And I'm going to talk about a few things I did which I think made it work for me. So the first thing I think that's super important whenever you're hiring a salesperson, in fact it's true whenever you're hiring anyone, but with sales it's especially true, is hire really, really, really slowly. So quite often we can rush into choosing someone for the job because we're really excited about the role and we want to move forward. You know, if you're an entrepreneur, you're probably an action taker, so you just want to get things done rather than doing it perfectly. But with hiring, the slower you go, the better it pays off. Like the more time you spend just trying to figure out whether someone's going to be a fit, once they start working with you, the less hiccups you'll have, the less realizations you'll have that you made a mistake. And you know, if you have to fire them and go through the whole hiring process again, it will take even more time, right? So the slower you go, the better. So what I recommend you do is instead of trying to fluke the hiring process, use one that works really, really well. And for me, the book Who, A Method for Hiring was a savior. It was incredible. I think that might be backwards for you right now. But Who, A Method for Hiring, if you just Google it, you'll find the book. Is the best framework for hiring people, and there's a 4-stage interview process that you can follow that I used when I hired my salesperson. And it seems arduous going through an interview process and having series of interviews, but it's absolutely worth it, right? Because you get to really understand the ins and outs of the person, their attitude. And by going through this process, I managed to hire an A player, right? Someone who is seriously committed, and I'm still grateful for it, you know, many months later. So there's 3 things I recommend you do before you hire a sales team, and these are important. I'll give you a little bit of advice on them, just to make sure that you get the most out of the position and it really helps you. These are 3 things I did before I made the hire. So number 1, get your numbers clear. Right, so you know you make a certain number of phone calls. How many calls do you expect to make before you can make a sale? Right, so what are your close numbers like? If you hire someone and you're not really sure how many sales they're going to close after doing say 10 calls, then you don't know if they're doing a good job or not. Right, you have no idea. So what I did before I made a sales hire is I did all of my sales calls myself for 90 days. Okay, so I was doing maybe on average 3 to 5 calls a day, something like that. Sometimes more, sometimes less. And by the end of that, I knew exactly what my numbers should be. I knew exactly who I was going to close. I knew exactly, you know, if someone was certain level of qualified for the program, like if they had X amount of budget, then there would be a 30% chance they would buy the big program, or a 20% chance they would buy a smaller program. Having this data before you make a sales hire, so valuable, because then, you know, if you're pulling in 30% close rate and they're pulling in a 15% close rate, then you know they're underperforming, and you can either rectify the problem and help them and give them stuff that they need to improve it, or you can hire someone else, right? Because you know that they're not really qualified, or haven't got the right attitude, or whatever it is. So that's the first thing. Get your numbers clear, right? That's really important. Second thing is I wouldn't try and hire a closer. There's a big thing at the moment, people saying, oh, you should hire a closer, someone who can, you know, close the deal, and everyone who gets on the phone try and close them on something, and use all this pressure to get them to sign up to your stuff. If you're running a service-based business, so if it's coaching, or maybe you have an agency, or you know, you have to actually work with the client for a long time, then you don't just want to close people, because what will happen is you'll end up working with people that you can't really help, you can't really serve, and they won't really get the result that they want, because they might not be a fit. Like, you might not be in a position to actually help them properly. So rather than seeing your salesperson as a closer, use them as a way to see if someone is a fit. And if they're not a fit and they're willing to pay, don't take the money. Right? It's not worth it. It'll just cause you stress. Right? So that's a big distinction. Third thing is, in my sales process, before we jump on a strategy session and talk for like 45 minutes, have something called a qualifying call. So like a 10-15 minute call where we just double check the stuff that they put in the application for the strategy session, and just go over it very quickly and just make sure that they're actually qualified, that they actually fit. And just to, the vibe check as well. If someone's going to be a nightmare, like, they'll show that up on the qualifying call. If someone's got a really bad attitude, you don't want to work with them. And on qualifying call, you can tell this stuff. So what I did with my salesperson, after we went through the 4-stage interview process and I really got to know them, rather than giving them the whole sales process, we started off just by them doing the qualifying calls, and they just did the 10-minute calls with the people on the phone. And there's a lot less pressure. They got less commission because they weren't actually closing the sale, they were just qualifying people. But they did that for like 2-3 weeks before being able to close people. And then we found that some people could actually join straight away on the qualifying calls. So then we started doing that, and then we started doing the strategy sessions, and then they would focus on closing the sale as well. So that's a really advisable thing to start off with if you want to start them a little bit slower, and you're worried that you might get them doing all the calls in a month, and then that month might have a massive dip in revenue. You can test the water by getting them just to do qualifying calls first, and it's less risky, and it might be a better approach. So that's my advice for hiring a sales team. This stuff just works so well for me, and enabled my business to grow so far. And then my marketing switched from trying to sell people stuff to try and get people on the phone, which is kind of nicer in a way, because when you do a webinar and at the end of the webinar you say, like, book a free strategy session, it's like you're cheating, right? Because you're not selling stuff, right? You're just giving away something for free. So your audience appreciates it as well. So have a think about this. Should you hire a salesperson? Maybe it's time. Do you want to hire another person? Maybe you can use this framework. Definitely get the Who, A Method for Hiring book. I definitely recommend that. And thanks so much for watching today's episode of Scale Tips, and I'll see you tomorrow.